In 1985, something unusual happened in Africa. A president stood before his people. He was not being forced out. There had been no military coup. No violent uprising. No civil war. Instead, he made a choice. After leading his country for more than 20 years, Julius Nyerere announced that he was stepping down. Many people could hardly believe it. Across Africa, it was common for leaders to hold on to power for as long as they could. Some changed their country's laws to remain in office. Others ruled until they died. But Nyerere chose a different path. He believed that leadership was not something to be owned. It was something to be entrusted. He quietly handed over power and returned to private life. The world watched with surprise. Why would a man willingly leave the highest office in the land? Who was this leader? What kind of person values service more than power? To find the answer, we must travel back many years. Back to a small village called Butiama, in what was then the British territory of Tanganyika. There, a young boy discovered a love for learning. He became a teacher. His students admired him so much that they gave him a name he would carry for the rest of his life. Mwalimu. It means teacher. Long before he became a president, he believed that the best way to change a nation was to educate its people. He would lead his country to independence. He would unite two nations into one. He would try to build a society based on equality, cooperation, and service. Some of his ideas would inspire the world. Others would be fiercely debated. But through every success and every disappointment, one thing remained unchanged: his quiet humility. Welcome to the African Archive, where we bring Africa's history to life through careful research and powerful storytelling. If you enjoy documentaries that explore the lives of the people who shaped Africa, subscribe and join us as we continue uncovering the continent's remarkable past. This is the story of Julius Nyerere, the teacher who set out to build a nation. Chapter 1. The boy who loved to learn. Long before he became known as Mwalimu, long before he led a nation, Julius Nyerere was a young boy growing up in the village of Butiama, in what was then Tanganyika. He was born on April 13, 1922. His father was a local chief. A chief is a traditional community leader who helps guide and represent his people. Although his family was respected, life was far from luxurious. Like other children in the village, Julius helped with daily chores. He watched the seasons change. He listened to the stories told by his elders. He learned the importance of honesty, respect, and responsibility. These lessons stayed with him for the rest of his life. But there was something that made Julius different. He loved to learn. He was curious about the world beyond his village. Every new lesson made him want to know more. His parents recognized his eagerness and encouraged him to attend school. At a time when very few Africans had the opportunity to receive a formal education, Julius worked hard to make the most of every chance he was given. His teachers quickly noticed his intelligence. He listened carefully. He asked thoughtful questions. He was disciplined and determined. Before long, it became clear that he had the ability to go much further than anyone had expected. As he continued his education, Julius discovered that learning was about more than passing examinations. Education gave people confidence. It helped them solve problems. It prepared them to improve their communities. These ideas shaped the way he looked at the world. After completing his studies, Julius trained to become a teacher. Standing in front of a classroom, he found great joy in helping others understand new ideas. He was patient. He explained difficult subjects in simple language. His students respected him, not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. Soon, people began calling him Mwalimu. In the Swahili language, it means teacher. The name suited him perfectly. Even years later, after he became president, many people continued to call him Mwalimu instead of Mr. President. It reflected the kind of leader he wanted to be. Not someone who ruled over people, but someone who guided them. Still, the young teacher could see that something was wrong. Tanganyika was under British colonial rule. The people worked hard. But the most important decisions about their country were made by a foreign government. Julius believed his people deserved something better. He knew that if he wanted to help change his country, he needed to learn even more. So he made a life-changing decision. He would leave Tanganyika and continue his education overseas. He was living as a teacher. But when he returned, he would carry a vision that would shape the future of an entire nation. Chapter 2. A teacher finds his purpose. Leaving Tanganyika was one of the biggest decisions Julius Nyerere had ever made. He was leaving behind his family, his students, and the country he loved. But he believed that if he wanted to help his people, he first had to learn everything he could. In 1949, he traveled to Scotland, a country that is part of the United Kingdom, to study at the University of Edinburgh. Very few Africans had the opportunity to study at a British university during that time. For Nyerere, it was more than a chance to earn a degree. It was a chance to understand the wider world. At university, he studied history, economics, and politics. He met people from different countries and cultures. He listened carefully to their ideas. But the more he learned, the more one thought stayed in his mind. Why should Tanganyika remain under foreign rule? Why should Africans not decide their own future? Education did not make him proud. It made him more determined. He realized that real change would not come from complaining. It would come from leadership. When Nyerere returned home, he went back to teaching. Once again, he stood before a classroom. Once again, he patiently explained lessons to his students. But something had changed. His classroom no longer seemed large enough. His country needed teaching too. Not lessons in reading or mathematics. Lessons in hope, unity, and self-belief. As he traveled around Tanganyika, he spoke with farmers, workers, village elders, and young people. He discovered that people from different ethnic groups wanted the same things: freedom, opportunity, and the chance to govern themselves. Nyerere believed that if these people could see themselves as one nation instead of many separate communities, Tanganyika would have a brighter future. In 1954, he founded the Tanganyika African National Union, better known as TANU. The new political party had a clear purpose: to lead Tanganyika peacefully towards independence. Unlike many struggles for freedom that became violent, Nyerere believed that patience, dialogue, and determination could achieve lasting change. He traveled tirelessly across the country. He spoke in towns. He spoke in villages. He explained difficult political ideas in language that ordinary people could understand. That was the teacher in him. He never spoke to impress people. He spoke so they could understand. And they listened. Support for TANU grew rapidly. More and more people believed that independence was no longer a distant dream. It was becoming a real possibility. The choir teacher from Butiama had become the leading voice of a nation ready to stand on its own. The lesson he had begun in the classroom was now being taught across an entire country. And before long, the world would hear it too. Chapter 3. Winning Freedom. By the end of the 1950s, change was sweeping across Africa. One country after another was beginning to demand independence from colonial rule. Tanganyika was no different. But Julius Nyerere believed that freedom should not come through hatred or revenge. It should come through unity, patience, and determination. As leader of the Tanganyika African National Union, TANU, he traveled across the country, speaking to thousands of people. He visited villages. He met farmers. He listened to workers. He spoke with traditional leaders. Wherever he went, he delivered the same message. Tanganyika belonged to its people. And its people were ready to govern themselves. His calm manner won the respect of many. Even British officials who disagreed with him recognized that Nyerere was thoughtful, disciplined, and committed to a peaceful transition. Instead of calling for violence, he encouraged dialogue and negotiation. He believed that lasting freedom should begin with peace. His message continued to gather support. TANU became the country's strongest political movement. As pressure for self-government increased, Britain began preparing Tanganyika for independence. Then, on December 9, 1961, history was made. Tanganyika became an independent nation. Across the country, people celebrated. Flags waved. Songs filled the air. For the first time, Tanganyika was governed by its own people. Julius Nyerere became the country's first prime minister. A year later, when Tanganyika became a republic, he became its first president. But Nyerere believed that independence was only the first step. He knew that political freedom meant little if the country remained divided. Just a few years later, another opportunity appeared. Off the coast of Tanganyika lay the island of Zanzibar. In 1964, Tanganyika and Zanzibar agreed to unite. Together, they formed a new nation. Its name was Tanzania. The union was historic. It brought together two different governments to create one country. More importantly, it reflected Nyerere's belief that unity made people stronger. For him, this was not simply a political agreement. It was proof that cooperation could achieve what conflict could not. Yet Nyerere understood that creating a country on paper was the easy part. Creating one people. That would take years of hard work. The celebrations were over. Now the real challenge began. How do you build a nation where people speak different languages, belong to different ethnic groups, and come from different histories? For Julius Nyerere, the answer began with one simple idea. Teach people that they belong to one nation. Not many. 1. Chapter 4. Building one nation. Winning independence had been a great achievement. But Julius Nyerere knew that freedom alone would not keep Tanzania together. A country could gain independence in a single day. Building a nation could take generations. Tanzania was home to more than 100 ethnic groups. Each had its own language, customs, and traditions. Many newly independent African countries struggled with divisions between different communities. Nyerere was determined that Tanzania would not follow that path. He believed the people needed something that would unite them. He chose Swahili. Although many languages were spoken across the country, Nyerere encouraged Swahili to become the national language. Children learned it in school. Government officials used it in public affairs. People from different communities could now speak to one another in a common language. It helped people see themselves as Tanzanians first. Nyerere also believed that education was the foundation of every strong nation. More schools were built. More teachers were trained. He wanted children in villages to have the same opportunity to learn as those in towns and cities. To him, education was not only about finding a job. It was about creating responsible citizens who could help build their country. But Nyerere's biggest idea was something he called Ujamaa. Ujamaa is a Swahili word meaning familyhood. He believed the nation should care for its people the way a family cares for one another. Instead of everyone thinking only about themselves, people would work together, share resources, and help one another succeed. Many villages were encouraged to farm together. The government hoped this would improve food production and make it easier to provide schools, health centers, and clean water. Nyerere believed this approach reflected traditional African values of cooperation and community. Many people admired his vision. They saw him as a leader who cared more about ordinary people than about personal wealth. Unlike many leaders, Nyerere lived a simple life. He did not surround himself with luxury. He believed that a leader should set an example. His honesty earned him respect both in Tanzania and across Africa. Yet not everything went according to plan. Some families did not want to move into the new Ujamaa villages. Others felt that the changes happened too quickly. The economy also began to struggle. The dream that had inspired so many people was becoming harder to achieve. For the first time, Nyerere faced a painful question. What happens when a good idea does not produce the results you hoped for? The answer would become the greatest test of his leadership. Chapter 5. The hardest lesson. Julius Nyerere believed that a leader should always be honest, especially when things were not going well. By the late 1970s, Tanzania was facing serious economic problems. life had become more difficult for many families. Food and everyday goods were sometimes in short supply. Factories were not producing as much as people had hoped. The government's income was falling. There was no single reason for these problems. Some were caused by events beyond Tanzania's control. Oil prices around the world had risen sharply, making fuel much more expensive. Tanzania also spent large amounts of money helping remove the government of Idi Amin in neighboring Uganda after Amin's forces invaded part of Tanzania in 1978. The war protected Tanzania's borders, but it placed an even greater strain on the country's economy. At the same time, many of Nyerere's economic policies were not producing the results he had expected. Some of the Ujamaa villages struggled to grow enough food. Many government-owned businesses operated inefficiently and lost money. As the economy weakened, criticism grew louder. Some people argued that Nyerere's vision had failed. Others believed his goals were noble but too difficult to achieve. Nyerere listened to the criticism. He did not pretend that everything was working perfectly. Unlike many leaders, he accepted that mistakes had been made. Yet one thing never changed: his personal integrity. No one accused him of using public office to become rich. He lived simply. He believed that leaders should serve the people, not themselves. Then, in 1985, Julius Nyerere made a decision that shocked many across Africa. He announced that he would step down as president. No one had forced him. The military had not overthrown him. He simply believed it was time for someone else to lead. After more than 20 years in office, he peacefully handed power to his successor. It was a rare moment in African politics. Many leaders fought to remain in office. Nyerere walked away willingly. He once said that leaders should know when it was time to leave. Now he was living by those words. His presidency had ended. But his influence had not. The man known as Mwalimu was about to teach one final lesson. Sometimes, the greatest measure of a leader is not how long they hold power, but how they choose to let it go. Chapter 6. Mwalimu's last lesson. After leaving office, Julius Nyerere did not disappear from public life. He no longer carried the responsibilities of a president. But he never stopped caring about Africa. Leaders from across the continent continued to seek his advice. They respected his wisdom, his honesty, and his willingness to speak the truth, even when it was unpopular. He also continued to encourage peace. Whenever conflict broke out in Africa, Nyerere believed that talking was always better than fighting. He reminded leaders that the purpose of power was to improve people's lives, not to divide them. At home, Tanzanians still called him Mwalimu. Not because he had once been a teacher, but because he never stopped teaching. His classroom had simply become much larger. It was now an entire nation. On October 14, 1999, Julius Nyerere died in London, where he had been receiving treatment for an illness. He was 77 years old. News of his death spread quickly across Africa. People mourned not only a former president, but a man they believed had lived with integrity. Today, Nyerere is remembered for many things. He led Tanganyika to independence. He helped unite Tanganyika and Zanzibar to create Tanzania. He promoted education. He encouraged national unity in a country with many different ethnic groups. He showed that leadership could be guided by humility instead of pride. His economic ideas remain debated. Some believe Ujamaa asked too much of the economy. Others believe it reflected a genuine desire to build a fair and equal society. History continues to discuss those questions. But there is one thing few people question. Julius Nyerere lived by the values he preached. He did not use leadership to enrich himself. He did not cling to power. He believed that a leader's greatest responsibility was to serve. Perhaps that is why, many years after his death, people still speak of him with respect. Not because he was perfect, but because he tried to lead with honesty, humility, and compassion. His life reminds us that building a nation is not only about roads, schools, or buildings. It is about building trust, building character, and building a sense of belonging. Thank you for joining us on the African Archive as we explore the life of Julius Nyerere. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the African Archive and turn on notifications. Together, we'll continue uncovering the remarkable people, kingdoms, and events that shaped Africa and helped shape the world. Some leaders are remembered for the power they held. Others for the victories they won. Julius Nyerere is remembered for something even greater. He taught a nation that leadership is not about standing above the people. It is about walking beside them. And that is why Africa still remembers him as Mwalimu, the teacher.